Welcome to the Confident Brushstrokes podcast with your host, Stephanie Paige Thompson. Stephanie is a young but internationally celebrated representational artist. On this podcast, Stephanie will interview other living master artists as well as answer questions from representational artists around the globe. We'll share practical insights to help you create with more clarity, conviction, and joy. Let's get into it. Welcome everyone to episode 4 of the Confident Brushstrokes podcast. I am your co-host, Adam Eek. And I am joined by the lovely and talented
Stephanie Paige Thompson. Hi, everybody.
Stephanie, how are you?
I'm doing well. I am back in the studio after a lot of travel last month, and I'm working on a portrait from our most recent broadcasting brushers. I got the likeness today, very much closer than I had it. Got the smile in. Tomorrow I put the hand in, and I'm really excited about some still lives that I have coming up.
I'm sure the listeners would love to learn a little bit more about you. For those who have been following Stephanie's career on more of a short-term basis, your painting material, the subjects that you're painting has largely been dominated by portraiture and figurative works. Talk to the audience a little bit more about what you're planning for landscapes, still life. Help us understand where you're headed next.
I've always liked portraiture the most, and then with recent endeavors with Patreon and broadcasting brushers, I have really gotten to dive into a good number of portraits and figurative pieces. But I love painting the landscape. I love painting still life as well, and I just recently started painting food. I usually think of still life as just clay objects or still objects. And food I would put into a different category, but I've recently been incorporating those. So with the weather getting nicer, I'm really excited to incorporate some more landscape into my repertoire. And I also really have a strong desire to focus a little bit more on flowers. I've painted lots of flowers in the past, but it's been a long time since I've really done a large floral piece. So I am really looking forward to incorporating some of those things, and I particularly, like I said, have some ideas for particular food-related still lives that I'm hoping to jump into. I have another little bit of travel with the Portrait Society coming up.
Yep.
I'm going to be on faculty. I'll be in the face-off for the first time. It's my 10-year anniversary of going to Portrait Society. So the first year that I went, it was one of the first events that I really entered into the art world and got to see people painting at a level that I'd only seen photos of on, their work on Instagram, Facebook, and then I saw them painting in real life, start to finish, how they were actually making these paintings, and sort of saw the art world in general for the first time and was absolutely enamored and certain that this was what I wanted to do with my life going forward. So this is a 10-year anniversary of really deciding that I wanted to be a painter, becoming absolutely obsessed, and so I'll be here. It's my first year being in the face-off, which is very exciting. This is kind of the first year they've had someone of my age also in the face-off.
Sure.
Sort of the next generation of artists. I've been in the future generations. They actually have a program for younger artists that are coming up in the manner of the artists that are on faculty. So I was in that program the last 2 years. And now I'm sort of graduated to the real thing with the big boys. So I'll be doing that, and I'll be doing a demo. So that's coming up. So my still life endeavors are probably going to go, I'm going to be planning for them and then finishing them, maybe starting and then finishing once I get back.
This is really a full circle moment for you in the sense that when we had first met, you had explained to me the Portrait Society of America and the annual conference really is the pinnacle of what the artist really aspires to in terms of entering the competition, placing, and also being viewed by other marquee artists as a peer. Mm-hmm. And I remember even when we were first getting married, your painting of Jamie Wyeth put you in the running for finalist in one of the competitions, I think in 2021 or 2022 because of COVID-19.
It was 2020. So
okay.
I got finalist in 2020. We got married in 2021. And so I was a finalist. We got engaged. We had our wedding on the calendar. And then everyone knows what happened around 2020. So the conference as a whole was canceled. The paintings never went to be seen in person. It was really quite a year to become a finalist for the first time. So we had all these plans that you were going to come out, you were going to be there. You know, it was like going to be the greatest moment of my life, my career up until that point. And then nothing happened. You know, there was no conference. It was all virtual. Everyone just sat in their apartments and there was a giant Zoom call with everybody. Yeah. And honestly, that was the best thing that could happen for me because it gave me a lot of perspective about what my true motivations were behind wanting to go up on that stage and receive it. It was really sort of an ego-based, I needed people to tell me that I was accepted, that I was an artist, that I had done a good work, as opposed to finding my worth in my identity in Christ, in, you know, the knowing that I was really proud of my work also without needing all this outside validation. Yep. So all of that happening, and me thinking I was going to get all of that validation, have this amazing feeling, you know, walk up on stage and be, you know, just validated internally. None of that happening was really way better than it all happening because it taught me so much. And I really do feel now so much more grounded.
Yeah, and a quick double click on a point that you had made about you being selected as being part of the face-off, and also your, I think, performing a demo with Michelle Dunaway as well, but your results over the last 5 years and how your paintings that you've entered into the PSOA competition, how they've been judged, they tell the story of an incredibly consistent artist who is continuing to be viewed as a top portrait artist. This is really important in the sense that this isn't a fluke. You now have shown an incredible level of consistency and the level of competition. We were going through the works this year, and there's absolutely stunning work. Jeff Hine, Rose Franson, our dear friend Grace DeVito, just incredible works. I think the bar this year over other years is so incredibly high. So congratulations to you. It's extremely exciting, and I don't think you're up and coming anymore. I think you have cemented yourself as being a top artist, and that's exactly what we've wanted for you.
Thanks, son. That's nice.
Yeah, and on a personal note, we did just celebrate our 5-year anniversary, which is incredibly fun. Over the last year, we've, of course, launched our passion project with a recent rebrand. Broadcasting Brushers is a part of the Confident Brushstrokes overarching project name as well. We've grown a lot closer. I've taken much more of an interest and a learning mentality around representational art. And one thing that I can comment to the audience is representational art is so very important. And Stephanie and I are both professing Christians. And one of the core reasons why we love representational art is because it beautifully portrays God's creation. And you don't have to be religious to for this to resonate with you. Is
that beauty matters.
Beauty matters. Painting people and capturing a wonderful likeness, capturing the rhythm, the essence of a person, painting a beautiful oceanscape, or capturing a mountain scene and bringing the beauty of nature into people's homes and bringing them joy in this way. This is an incredibly high calling, and we know that the artist knows this, but sometimes it can be discouraging. Oftentimes it can be discouraging. And so I have really appreciated the impact that representational art has had on me personally, and just how dang hard it is. It is hard. So for all those artists, please be encouraged, because I think what you are doing is incredibly important. Hobbyist, or it's your occupation, please keep up the great work, and art is bringing us closer every day in our relationship.
That's true. With the last year we've really partnered in ways that we hadn't previously. You know, you had always been extremely supportive, but we had kept our various career pursuits, talked about them a great deal together, but they were very separate. You know, you go handle yours, I'll handle mine. And so you kind of joining into the business side and the creative side of my painting has been really helpful for me to have someone who is a little bit more well-versed in even the principles, how the art world works, the shows, everything that goes into making a painting. You see that the struggle and the reward a little bit more clearly, versus before it would be, you'd come into the studio halfway through the afternoon because you just had a great call. Well, I'm having a really hard painting day, so I'm not in a place to be able to chat, but you come in, I remember this multiple times, you just come in celebrating, and I would have to be, how do I need to mentally prepare myself for this conversation. I'm just not in that place. I'm deep in the trenches, and I'm so excited for you, but I need to be still in these trenches, and we could talk about it maybe at a better time. I think that there's must have been a better understanding of, here's some of the harder parts of painting and the joys as well for how we have interacted. So, it's been fun.
Yeah, you're really ringing a bell for me. I think it'd be fun for us to consider even dropping an episode with the core theme being harmonious living with an artist and their spouse who has a different vocation. Oftentimes, you see your peers and artists marry artists, which is totally understandable. But there are plenty of you out there that are artists and who have married people in different professions. And certain things like an artist studio space and their painting time being sacred, it's really important to navigate those issues and really have boundaries there. So we'll put a pin in that and think about that for a future episode. The title for the 4th episode this evening is Studying the Masters. And a quick reminder for all of the listeners, we have compiled a list of questions that go along with this theme, Studying the Masters, from our online Patreon group called Broadcasting Brushers, and the Patreon itself is called Confident Brushstrokes. Feel free to look Stephanie up on there. We have a wonderful amount of content on there, but as I ask Stephanie these questions, they are real questions generated from artists who are in their studio, honing their craft, and really wanting to have Stephanie divulge a little bit more. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started.
Let's do.
Okay. Question 1. When you approach a master copy, say a Sargent, what's your actual process? Are you trying to match it exactly, or is it more interpretive than the artist might expect?
Great question. It would be be dependent on what I'm trying to learn by doing the master copy. If I'm trying to learn the exact paint application that Sargent used to further my understanding of brushwork and of drawing, to really create an exact copy that could almost be a forgery, then I'm going to spend time studying the painting and planning what the layers probably were, looking at, okay, if this color looks like it was placed on top of the local color of the skin, then what color was maybe underneath the local color of the skin. So it would be a great deal of study of the piece, and then careful plotting of the placement and mimicking the exact brushwork, right? That would be one goal. Another goal could be to study the color mixtures Sargent had. So I'm not worried necessarily about an exact drawing likeness because that's not my goal. I am working on my drawing skills in other areas.
Sure.
What I'm looking at is the color. So I could get a nice drawing in. I could even draw, if I just don't want to be distracted by the drawing at all, you could draw it in first, trace it even, because that's not the point. It's not a drawing exercise, it's a color exercise. And then mix up the colors to match them exactly, or even do it in black and white if what I'm trying to study is the composition. Maybe I take the daughters of Sir Darley Boyd. It's the one with the 4 sisters and the giant vases that are in Boston. The painting is in Boston. And I would do a black and white painting with maybe even more limited values than are even there. Maybe just do 3 values and be studying the shapes. So master copies can take many different looks and processes depending on what you personally are wanting to learn from that master, right? Are you studying
Yeah.
the composition? Are you studying the drawing and the sensitivity and the edges by doing an exact rendering? Is it the color? All of those things would come into play.
Yeah, and we've talked about this, I think, at a very high level, but this again reminds me of this relationship between preparation and execution. And so what I'm hearing you say is, look, you're not going to just show up to a museum or pull this master painting up on your computer and using it as the reference, just go ahead and put, start painting right away. It's, hey, what am I trying to get out of this? What's the intent of this session? And that's going to dictate your process, right? That's incredibly impactful. And that was something that I noticed about you from the very beginning, is that you always had a very organized way of approaching the easel as well. So very,
Thanks. You've made me more organized. So hopefully I'll be just super organized.
good. Let's stay on this topic. Second question, there's a difference between looking at a master painting and seeing it. If you're going to walk someone through a painting, what would you point to first and why? And before you answer the question, this is really pointed for me because you do this with me a lot, is when you bring me to museums.
Oh, okay.
And
I was like,
you walked me through, hey, look, this is what you should be focusing on in terms of how this master artist is leveraging value to evoke certain emotions and things like that. So as you get into it, you could think about it through a couple of different lenses, I think, especially probably for the artist and then for somebody that's purely from an educational standpoint as well.
Yes, that's a really good point and a really great question. I would love to do an in-person museum meetup where we walk through as a group and talk about paintings, because it is truly one of my favorite things ever. I just will never understand people not liking museums. And from the time I was even 11 years old and was in Washington, D.C. for the first time with all of my family, I have 4 sisters, they were languishing on the benches, bored out of their minds, and I was, going at a snail's pace from painting to painting. I didn't know anything about painting, and I was just so enamored with it. So it's been a lifelong love. If I'm going to be in front of a master painting and I am talking about it with someone else, then I will probably say, yes, here we have this beautiful piece that, let's take, for example, the horses at the fair by Rosa Bonheur, right? It's this massive, that's not the real name, so we'll have, the painting, it's in New York City. It's this huge painting with almost life-size horses. I would say, yes, we're so overwhelmed by the grandeur of the piece and the horses and everything, but let's look at the overall composition. Why does it feel like what it feels like? First, acknowledge what is happening.
Yeah.
Huge painting, very monumental, lots of horses, lots of dust, lots of movement. Okay, now I'm going to ask, why does it feel like that? What is causing these horses to feel so strong and to feel like there is air that is also hitting me, the viewer? Like I could start coughing from the dust. Okay, well, we already mentioned the size. That's one of the reasons that it's so impactful. If this was a 6x8, it'd have a totally different approach than it being, it's so huge. And then the composition. There's this circular sort of flowing composition to it that creates this whirlpool effect that then furthers the rhythm of those horses all being sort of in a certain level of chaos. And even the way that the people in the scene are looking and the way the direction of the horses and how their eyes are painted, some where they're looking creates an addition to that rhythm, right? And then the clouds in the sky further that, so I'll look at what it is usually very clearly. Okay, it might be a beautiful woman sitting on a chair. Great. Most people would see that and say, oh, it's a beautiful woman. Well, then I'm going to move past and say, well, why is she looking so dainty? Oh, because look at this huge archway behind her that's the darkest dark against the pale, pale skin of her skin, right? The pale value. So there's this huge contrast here. That's why you're looking there first. That's why this painting is about this woman and not about all of the lambs at her feet that you didn't even notice until now, right? Oh, because the value is mimicked. See, this painting doesn't exist. I'm just making this up, but you can see it now in your mind, right? All of a sudden you went down and you saw these lambs and they're, and so I'll sort of talk through the painting from most obvious to less obvious, and then probably finish with edges and And also the frame, you know,
Yep.
how is the frame impacting this? How is the color of the wall of the museum helping or hurting it? How's the lighting? All of that, how you experience the painting. And I would get just as excited as this about it.
And to tie a knot between the first question and this one, when we're thinking about either copying a master work and also seeing it for this beautiful culmination of all of these different elements really coming together to make this harmonious, unified painting, it's incredibly important to break this down systematically and make it digestible, not only for yourself, but also for somebody else if they're
Totally.
a part of the viewing audience as well. And
Totally, because what happens when you're in a museum, by and large, is, unless you go to the modern wing, sorry, but by and large, there's not going to be, okay, I'm going to move on from that. I'm going to hate for that. But by and large, when you're in the museums, there's great work. And you can become sort of desensitized to how great it is, you know, and you just walk up and you have this certain standard visually that is constantly being met. And you almost need a palate cleanser of just a poorly thought out or a very beginning painting, right? It's almost like coffee beans in a perfume store to remind yourself, oh, right, this is very, very difficult to reach this base level that I'm now taking for granted.
Yep.
So you can start to walk up to it and say, oh, beautiful woman sitting on a chair with lambs at her feet. Got it. Totally great. Instead of realizing, oh, the way that she has been painted is so unbelievably tender. And the control of those values is so, so, so precise. It's creating this unbelievable mood to this piece, right?
Yeah.
Instead of just coming up, because what can happen is you spend hours in the museum, you're just so filled with inspiration and it feels like, oh, all my paintings that are being a problem in the studio, I have the fix for them. Come back to the studio the next day, that happy feeling is gone, you're no longer looking and surrounded by the beautiful architecture, you're back in your studio and the problem paintings are staring back at you, and you realize all you did was look at the museum paintings on the wall and say, that's beautiful. And then never ask yourself the question, well, why is it beautiful? Why is it so great? Why am I standing here longer than I stood next to the last one? To then come up to the painting, because just having beauty as your goal for the piece is not going to help you solve the problems.
Yep.
You have to come up to this problem piece and say, okay, is it the values? And what is wrong with the values? What were the values doing right in those paintings I loved at the museum that I can now superimpose onto this painting?
Yep.
You know, that woman was elegant. This woman looks very hefty or ogreish, right? And very like she's not real or rubbery or like there's no bones underneath, okay? So that's a drawing thing. All of these questions that you can then ask yourself beyond just saying beautiful and then moving on mentally, I have found are really the difference maker between visiting a museum and having momentary inspiration and visiting a museum and learning from the masters who are long since dead. You're not able to talk to them. The plaques on the wall are basically useless except for dates, and still being able to glean a lot of information from them, though it's nothing verbal.
Yeah, and another parallel again is, I think of the saying, how do you eat an elephant?
Right.
One bite at a time.
Right.
And when we think about skills or a knowledge gap, it's always going to be best to categorize where you feel like your deficiencies are as an artist, and then you model how you're working on this master copy, or you model what you're focusing on when you go to the museum and check out the master's works, right? Hey, let's focus on how Sergeant Soroya Zorn focused on their values. Or today I'm going to go and just check out their brushwork. And I'm really going to index my time on focusing on that and then driving towards mastery before I think about moving on to the next element of how you're going to get to mastery as an artist as well. So wonderful, wonderful answer there. Third question for you, Stephanie. The Munsell color system keeps coming up for students trying to understand color relationships and mixing grays. Is this something you'd recommend artists actually work with at the easel, or is it more of a conceptual framework to understand once and then move on?
I'll give you my personal answer, and it will probably differ from someone that truly uses the Munsell system of color and all the chips and is finding the exact colors with the chips throughout. I've never gone that deep into the Munsell system. but I do find the Munsell color theory chart to be helpful, and even a little more helpful than like a typical color wheel. I actually talk about this at great length in the Academy tier on Patreon, the Confident Brushstrokes Patreon. I have a tier where I take a deep dive into each of the principles of painting. Extremely deep, you know, a mile deep and 1 inch wide. So we have a whole video series on value, and we have a whole video series on color. So there's an entire video series about color and a whole video about this system and how to think about it. So if you're curious for more of this, there's more out there on Confident Brushstrokes Patreon. But the Munsell system of color, you know, a usual color wheel would be the pie with the different shapes. You know, it goes from red to orange to yellow to green to all the way around, right? Well, the Munsell system of color is 3D, and it involves not just the color or the hue, red, yellow, blue, green, purple, all of that, but also the level of chroma it has, how bright or how dull the color is, and then also factors in the value that hue of a certain chroma has, right? So it's going in all these different directions, and we talk through that very specifically in a deeper video. I have found that to be extremely helpful to understand while I'm mixing, and also just to have as a verbal understanding of color, because for a long time hue and chroma meant the same thing to me, and it was working so well, but when I saw this system and learned the difference between hue and chroma, it helped just my mental clarification and my mental conversation while I was talking, right? To myself, you know, silently. Now I talk a lot more out loud with Patreon and different things, but whenever I'm painting, I'm having this conversation in my mind. And so personally, I think having a understanding of color and mixing several color wheels, whether it's the Munsell system, whether it's color charts, whether it's just a typical color wheel, is very helpful to just sort of experiment and try it out for yourself, right? And see what happens when the color actually mixes, and try it with different pigments, and just get into this understanding and thinking about color as a tool versus looking at a red tube of paint and thinking about an apple, a red apple, you know, and looking at an orange tube of paint and thinking about painting an orange, you know, and labeling the colors based off of what they are instead of thinking about them as a tool. So my short answer would be, love the Munsell system of color. It's very helpful. I find it to be helpful to look at, understand, digest, and then use as sort of a mental clarification. And making some color studies or color wheels, understanding your particular palette, really helpful. I don't keep color charts all around me all the time to pull up for different paintings. I know some artists do. I know Richard Schmid highly recommended doing that, right? At this stage of my career and my creative process, I don't do that. But having the groundwork of having made the color charts is very valuable to me.
And I'll say this. When we're thinking about proficiency in any field or subject matter, the foundation that's being built on is a thorough understanding of the jargon or verbiage that's being used. And so the foundation here is being able to define your terms. When we're thinking about value, hue, and chroma, if you can't make that distinction as an artist, it's highly likely that it's actually going to be beneficial for you to put a Munsell chart right next to you while you're painting. And this matters because as you progress in your practice and you can start to discern the differences in these 3 different areas when it comes to color, then it becomes second nature, and then you move on. When I met you, you were already well on your way to becoming a living master artist. So these fundamental aspects of where you were as an artist, you're already beyond this. But if you were to say, hey, for an artist that's starting out or they're in their first couple of years of painting, or they're a novice artist and they're looking to move forward to intermediate, I think one of the hallmarks or one of the obvious ways an artist is going to show that they have a strong skill set and a strong knowledge base is going to be able to be defining their terms. I think that's really important. So that way, as they progress, they're saying, oh, this is second nature to me. And I watch you mix color. You know exactly how you're going to mix color. And then you even spoke about Rose Franson mixing color, right? And so there are levels to it.
Yeah,
But
she's so fast.
Yeah, as we think
Unbelievable.
about where you're at in the artist's journey, it's going to be a sliding scale. It can be really valuable.
And honestly, we're all using the same materials, we're all using the same principles, and the power is in your understanding, in your mind,
Yes.
and the control of your mind. You know, I often think about, and had this posed to me first as a young artist, that you really do want to treat yourself almost like an athlete, right? And be keeping yourself in good conditioning.
Yep.
And everybody that really makes it to an incredible level as an athlete spends, you know, a tennis player might spend all day long just practicing one way of hitting the ball over and over and over again, or one style of footwork, or, you know, just a very niche
Yep.
exercise. And so these sorts of things, I think, are sort of that sort of, I'm an athlete
Yep.
mindset. I'm training constantly to be excellent. So
Yeah, I love that analogy, because you think about the basics and form, shooting a basketball, swinging a bat, even your stride as a track runner. You start with the basics, and you really focus on mastering the basics before you move on to the intermediate terms. And
then when you get to a certain level, it's your mind that you have to control, because now you're performing at a high level, right? It's a totally different thing, way bigger stakes, you know, but like Olympians,
Right.
they've long since mastered the job.
yeah,
And now they have to master their mind to be able to do the job on command, right? And to do it every single time. And I think it's no different as a painter, right? You at some point have sort of learned the material, right? You have understood the basics, and now it's time to understand them at a much deeper level, or to just constantly be applying them at an excellent level. And that's where understanding the vocabulary and how you're thinking about these terms is helpful. So, all right, let's go to the next question.
this is such a perfect segue. You think we would have planned it or something like that. Question, next one is it possible to have too much art knowledge? Sometimes I feel as though I'm trying to drink it all in from an open fire hose. How do you know when you've taken in enough information and any more is detrimental rather than helpful?
Yeah. Okay, for the record, we didn't plan that would be a great segue. You were truly being funny there. Yes, there can be such a thing as too much information, and it differs person to person, so I'm going to give sort of a generic opinion about this. Constantly looking to other people and mimicking other people's approaches, whether it's every single day taking a new workshop, or watching someone else's video and then trying to copy it, or trying to then, you've watched one video and said, okay, now I understand how this person paints this, now I'm going to do it. It's not that quick, right? Now you've been exposed to it, and now you need to paint 10 to 15 to 20 to 100 paintings to really understand what that person was talking about. And it won't be until probably at least 5 paintings in that you really understand, oh, this is why they started the painting this way, or this is why they have that color on their palette, or this is why they controlled their palette XYZ. So if you're constantly seeking new information out from other people, and it's so easy now online, right? Because you can also do it just with your casual scroll of Instagram in the morning, or you walk into the studio and you just flip Instagram open right before you start painting as a habit. Now you're just unloading all of this information from other people. You might not even be realizing it, but even just seeing a reel of someone else's process now has you thinking how you should paint your painting. Or what other people are painting. You get on, you might see someone has just won an award for this big painting. Well, you were going to paint a still life, but that was a landscape. Now all of a sudden, without even thinking about it, you're not as excited about the still life and wondering if that's the right thing to paint, right? Because now you've unloaded this information from someone else's process right before you begin your own creative process. So there is a definite time for intense learning and studying, but you have to pair that time studying and learning with working it out at the easel.
Yeah.
And taking it from this, I think of it very visually. You know, you learn this new information, it's floating above your head right out here, and you can see it playing behind your eyes, but it hasn't integrated into your brain yet by flowing through the brush, right? And then once you sort of paint a couple of those paintings and really struggle with it, or really not struggle and get it very easily because it's not, it fits right into your vocabulary, whatever it might be,
Right.
then it sort of settles down into your brain and it falls into the slot that it needs to, because what is the truth is you don't need every piece of advice that I have to give you. You don't need every piece of advice that XYZ other artist whose work you're looking at has to give you, because you have a unique skill set. And so you're going to take a couple pieces from me and they're going to fall into that brain slot up there, right? And it's going to be perfect. Other things will fly away in the wind. Maybe years later, all of a sudden it'll pop back in. That's happened to me, right?
Yep.
Immediately slots fill up with the most pertinent information for me at the time, and the higher level things years later I'll remember something that an artist told me in a workshop, and I'm like, oh, I finally get it now. I had to do all these hundreds of paintings for me to finally get what that person was saying. I thought I got it then. So you have to pair the learning with time spent at the easel. And time spent at the easel, you might be trying to mimic someone else's approach, right? But time spent at the easel where you've protected your creativity and haven't looked at Instagram right before you got there, or listen to someone else's podcast about their entire process or why they paint, right? That could be inspiring, but it could also be, just be aware of how it's impacting you, right? If you come into the easel suddenly with all these other people's ideas in your brain, it could be more detrimental, right, than helpful. You might just need some time to listen to music without words, right? And really enter a creative place and work out the things that that are floating above your head so they sink in fully into your brain.
So well spoken there, and I totally agree with you. The way that I view it is we live in the information age, and it has two key impacts on you as an artist, or really anybody else in terms of any vocation. And the first impact is going to be on your brain, and you really have limited brain power to be able to devote to a specific pursuit at any given time. It's just a fact of life. And so as you think about just continuing to absorb all this knowledge and continue to absorb and absorb and absorb, there's a part of your brain that is going to learn and absorb by doing. And for some people, it's actually more impactful. Like myself, I am more of an experiential learner. You can hear so much, but when it really comes down to it, you have to do it, and you have to get these repetitions. Reminds me of C.W. Mundy, right? He talks about repetition, repetition, repetition.
And mileage.
And mileage. And that's the second piece, is that when you're thinking about knowledge and gathering up this knowledge, it takes up time. It takes up a lot of time. And you should be questioning yourself as an artist healthily and saying, is this pursuit of knowledge actually hindering me from going to the easel? Right?
Right.
Am I using this as a crutch to say, well, I'm learning, but I'm not actually painting? And that's a really hard thing to reconcile, because it's a very noble thing to seek out knowledge, but should you actually be painting? And then, of course, I'm going to continue to talk about the dovetail here is there a way for you to systematically just focus on one aspect of your painting practice, as opposed to absorbing all this knowledge that's likely running the whole gamut of what it means to be an artist, whether it be the business side or focusing on all these different aspects of your practice?
This question really hits home because I just returned from a workshop, the first workshop I've taken in about 7 years, and with Rose Franson. And there were very specific things I wanted to learn from her. And when I returned home, I had this feeling that I had all this information floating above my head, and I was honestly confused about how I even paint. Even in the workshop, because I'm watching her and I want to mimic her while I'm there so that she can help me, right? And I can sort of take my skills and put them right next to hers, right? We're painting the same model. I can take my painting up to her painting and see the very clear differences.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so helpful to be put into these situations of learning, right? Because then you have your weaknesses thrown into the light, and you are like I keep saying, it's not really the right word, but you're onloading. What's the better word? Downloading new information. But then there is, for me, this time afterwards where there's almost this floundering, or, I'm like a very wet sponge in a ginormous ocean, and I've already filled up so much information, but there's all this other information I'm trying to soak up, right? Yeah. But I have to get out of the pool for a little bit and work systematically, suck that information in, and then jump back into the ocean again. It took me about a week and a half. Well, I mean, I'm still actually sort of recovering because I've just got so much more information, and now my sights have been raised above my skills again, right? And so I'm going to be working to work this out, and I'm going to be very selective about what sort of information I am seeking. I'm not going to sign up for another workshop in the next 6 months. Well, there's other reasons why I won't, because I don't have time for that, right? All these different things, but if I wouldn't be taking 4 workshops in 4 months. Because there's just not enough time to really download the information for me personally. So, great question.
Yeah, and this is a fascinating point too, and we'll move on. This is like a pretty common misnomer about top performers, likely not only artists, but really anybody in any other profession. The top performers aren't necessarily the fastest learners. They are the fastest to implement, right? And there's a huge emphasis on this. And how do they implement faster? They focus on fewer, and they go deeper, and they get more granular, and then they do, and then they execute.
Yeah.
And so that is the exhortation here. Is the answer in short form is likely yes, you actually can absorb too much knowledge. And if it's scattered and not as organized as it can be, that's where your hidden superpower is going to be, is sifting through that information, distilling and synthesizing what you need to go focus on doing 1 or 2 things in an excellent way, in a measured, in a focused way, and then you move on. I really like that question. It was like great, just popping off point for both of us. Last question. Are there rules you wish more artists would hold on to longer before abandoning them? Things that feel restrictive, but are actually doing important work early in training?
It's a great question. It's a difficult question for some, to a certain degree, because I was trained in a very principles forward manner and not rules. What is a rule I wish that people wouldn't abandon so quickly is essentially the question. I wish they wouldn't abandon the principles so quickly. Because I've heard this so many times from people. I understand value, and I understand drawing, and I understand composition, but my paintings don't look the way I want them to look. Well, if you really understood those things, they would look the way you wanted them to look. Because Sargent, whose paintings you love, or Zorn, whose paintings you love, they understood value and color and composition and edges and paint quality. The same principles that you have been taught, that you are saying that you fully grasp. And they probably weren't satisfied with their paintings either, because they're artists, right? And they were excellent artists, so they were constantly striving for more. But, you are satisfied with their paintings.
Right.
They might be ahead of you, right? And so there's a certain point where I think people think, and I have fallen into this trap, and what has really hit home with me is, again, taking this workshop with Rose Franson. It was all the same things that I have been working on. New things too. I'm not saying I knew everything that was going on in this workshop, not at all. But I realized the first day, I am not going to create a painting that is measurably different than the paintings I was creating at home today. Whereas early in my career, when I had very little understanding of value, they would come in and say, oh, well, look, I'm painting on a white canvas. The skin color looks really too dark against white, but look, it's very much lighter than the darkish dark that I can put in here now. Now look at how I'm understanding. Mind blown. My painting looks completely different than all the paintings I was doing up until that point and forever after, right? It's a very actionable, huge learning moment. And now with Rose Franson, it was very, very minute. She is now working at a level at the highest athlete, and I now am working to get to that highest athlete point. So I learned very quickly, all of these things that I'm learning are going to take time to implement because I just have to work on seeing more clearly. I need to work on understanding color and thinking about color differently, and how I mix it will then affect then how my overall painting works. So the principles, just the masters that I have been able to spend time with, they're all just working to understand the principles better and better and better. And there's no point in an artist's career necessarily, maybe check back with me in 10, 20, 50 years, hopefully. But there's this point where people think, okay, I'm going to spend time studying the principles so that then I can become an artist. And then I'm going to worry about my style. And I'm going to worry about what I'm painting. And I'm going to worry about how it's received, or how I dress to fit my persona, or whatever. It's like, then I'll be an artist, and then I'll just let that stuff go, and the paintings will paint themselves, and I'll have these other more important things to think about. Style being like one of the biggest ones, right?
Yep.
Now it's time to worry about my style. No. You're just constantly understanding the same things, the core principles, better and better and better. Your work then, your style comes out of that, just like handwriting. We all have the same alphabet, but our handwriting, as we become into adulthood, I would know if you left a note on the counter versus your mom visiting left a note for me on the counter versus our neighbor, right? Because all of you would be writing in the same language, the same letters, but it would be totally different. So yeah, I would say don't abandon the principles. Just become so in love with the process of understanding them and approaching the easel saying, what if the drawing did this? What if the value did this? What if I experimented with this? And realize you're just constantly in a level of experimentation.
Right.
And the greats never graduate from experimenting.
I just love that analogy of everyone understanding how to write, and then your style really comes through in your handwriting, right? It's this mastering of the basics, and then your style.
It will find you.
In.
If you try to find it, it will be very, very stilted. And it'll be very inauthentic. And it'll be way, way harder than if you just spend the time painting and studying, and then all of a sudden you realize, you have a style. It's kind of like great chefs. The best food isn't always the most intense ingredients, right? A really good chef knows how to take a carrot and make it an experience you've never had before.
And to close the loop here, what I've noticed in my personal vocation, and I think this ties in very, very well with this, don't forget the basics or the principles of art. There are various frameworks that I can use to evaluate how effective I'm being in my role and how I'm executing well in my day-to-day. And so many people often misconstrue understanding the frameworks themselves and then actually how to get utility out of them. And for me, I think when we think about the artist, it's evaluating your own work with a critical eye. Just because perhaps you understand the principles of art does not mean that you're executing well on them. Now, this is very important because being an artist is a crazy mental game. And so I think the focus is, again, distill it down. What are one or two things that you're doing exceptionally well with your work? And then what are one or two things that you understand in principle, but that you're actually not executing that well on? And then seeking out how to make those things better. And the main theme of this episode, I think, is very powerful and impactful, is how can you take so much and distill it down to where you can drive actionable insights and give advice to yourself and others in such a way where they can say, or where you can say, I really understand one or two key things that I can work on next time I go to the easel, and I'm going to be a better artist for it. And I think that's really, really powerful. Really appreciate you taking the time with me. It's always a pleasure breaking this down with you.
And thank you for your questions, everybody in the Broadcasting Brushers community. And if you have a question for us, don't hesitate to put it in the comments. We'd love to have your question on the next episode, though our next episode is kind of special. Can I share about it?
Yeah.
Our next episode, we have our first interview. Can we share the person, or does that need to be a secret? It can be a secret.
It can be a secret.
We have an interview with a very good friend of mine and an unbelievable painter. I'm really excited about it. So be on the lookout for episode 5 coming soon. And like I said, if you have a question that you would like answered, it can be about the principles of painting. It can be about the mental side of painting. It can be about practicing certain skills. It can be whatever. Drop them in the comments below, and it'd be fun to chat about it.
Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for the next Confident Brushstrokes podcast. Thanks, Steph.
Thanks, honey. I love you. Bye, guys.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Confident Brushstrokes podcast. If you found value in this conversation, hit subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, and consider leaving a rating or review. It helps other artists discover the show. Want to connect with Stephanie? Follow her on Instagram and YouTube at Stephanie Page Thompson. If you're looking for deeper dives, tutorials, or community support, check out her Patreon, where she shares exclusive content for artists at every level. Until next time, keep painting with confidence.